She was sold by her mother-in-law for being infertile. Not with words, not with papers, just a quiet agreement in the back room of the dry goods store. A sack of flour, 2 bottles of whiskey, and a promise never to return. That's what Louisa May was worth on a winter Thursday. She didn't cry when the wagon pulled away, leaving her standing in the frostbitten ruts with a shawl too thin and boots too loose. She'd already done all her crying 3 winters ago, in a silent birthing room where nothing had come but blood and stillness. After that, silence was the only language she spoke. The man who took her wasn't a stranger, not quite. Sheriff Cole. Trask knew everyone in Meadow Ridge, even the ones folks tried to forget. He wasn't the lawman folks respected, only the one they tolerated. His hands were too heavy, his breath sour, and his stare always drifted where it shouldn't. He took her to a 1-room house down by the stockyard, gave her a corner, a thin mattress, and chores. No promises, no ring. Just the echo of a door that never closed gently. Louisa moved through those days like smoke, unnoticed, untouchable, barely real. The town watched but said little. She had become one of those women they called unlucky in polite circles, and damaged when they thought she couldn't hear, but she heard everything. The creak of the sheriff's boots in the dark, the wind clawing at the broken window pane, the whisper of children passing by, daring each other to look in, and then one day there was snow. A thick, blinding storm that bent fences and silenced every bird. Cole left before dawn to chase a thief into the hills and didn't come back. Why? Nightfall, the house was still cold, and her hands were raw from splitting logs. That's when the knock came, soft and certain. She opened the door and saw a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, worn down like a rail post from too many seasons. His coat was patched, hat pulled low, boots caked with road dust, and in each of his arms, a child no more than 4. Twins, eyes too tired to be young. Silent as she was, "I was told this was the sheriff's place," the man said. His voice was slow, rough like river stones. "Name's Yuan Carter. I ain't here to trouble no one. Just lookin' for a place to wait out the storm." She stepped aside without speaking, not because she trusted him, but because storms had a way of deciding who you let in. The twins didn't speak. They watched her with the same hollow caution she carried in her own bones. That night, she lit the fire twice, once for warmth, and once for something she didn't yet have a name for. By morning, the wind had stopped, but Yuan didn't leave. Nor did she ask him to. The house felt different with them inside. Not warmer, not yet, but less hollow. The air held breath instead of ghosts. The twins didn't cry, didn't fidget. They sat side by side like stones on a riverbank, always watching. One had a scar above his eyebrow. The other clutched a threadbare cloth doll by the neck. Boys, but quiet as girls in mourning. Louisa moved around them like smoke, careful not to startle. She fixed biscuits with lard and watered-down molasses, slid them onto the table, and stepped back. The children didn't look at her, but they ate. Yuan murmured a soft thanks she barely heard. He slept by the hearth, a rifle propped beside him, and one arm across both boys. Louisa stayed in her corner, facing the wall. She didn't ask where he'd come from or why he was running. She didn't need to. His face told enough, skin weathered past recognition, eyes too tired to blink twice, shoulders bowed like he was always bracing for something. That week, the storm settled over Meadow Ridge like a blanket soaked in ice. Roads disappeared. Wells froze. The sheriff didn't come back. No one knocked on the door. No one came looking. Yuan chopped wood without speaking, fixed the window with scrap from the barn. When the stovepipe clogged, he climbed the roof and cleared it in the dark, boots slipping on the slate. Louisa watched from the ground, arms wrapped tight across her ribs. When he came back down, covered in soot and snow, he didn't look at her, just nodded like that meant something. Each evening, she lit the lamp and sat with the boys. They still hadn't spoken, not once. But one evening, as she rinsed their tin, cups in the basin, the one with the scar stepped close. He looked up at her, lips parted like he meant to ask something but didn't. She knelt without speaking. He didn't flinch. He touched the corner of her dress. Then, just as softly, placed his doll in her lap. It was missing one eye. She didn't move for a long time. The silence between her and Ewan started to change after that. Still no real talk, only the kind that lived in small gestures. He left his coat near her chair. She folded it without asking. He passed her the salt before she reached. She placed a biscuit on his plate without looking up. One night, she found herself laughing not loud, just a breath that escaped when one of the boys sneezed and startled himself. Ewan looked at her, eyes narrowing like he wasn't sure he'd really heard it. She turned away, ashamed, but he said nothing, just pulled the boy onto his lap and held him there like something worth keeping. Outside, the world stayed frozen. But inside, the chill had lifted, just a little. Enough to matter. The thaw came slow, as it always did in the high country. First in the trees' bare limbs sweating sap, then in the creek out back, where the ice began to whisper and shift. The road into town remained a mud trap, and no rider passed by. Ewan stayed. He moved like a man who'd forgotten he was allowed to rest, kept the axe sharp, repaired the hen house even though there were no hens. And every night, when the fire dimmed, he sat with a boy on each knee and stared into the orange. Glow like he was watching something burn far off. Louisa didn't press him. But sometimes she noticed his hand drift to the chain around his neck. A small locket hung there worn silver, the clasp broken. He never opened it, just held it when the boys cried in their sleep, or when the wind carried voices that weren't really there. One evening, she found him out back by the fence, staring at the line of trees. "You left somewhere," she said. Her voice startled even her. "Didn't you?" He didn't turn, just shifted his weight and said, "We all leave somewhere." She waited. "My wife died giving birth," he said after a time. "Last spring. Her name was Alice." The name dropped like stone into still water. She was strong. Too strong, maybe. Told me not to worry when the bleeding started. He swallowed. The boys were inside, asleep on the floor, their bodies curled like commas between blankets. They came too early. I didn't know what to do with them. I buried her on the ridge, packed what I could, rode south. "Why here?" she asked. He shrugged. "Didn't mean to stop. Just got tired of the road." She nodded. That part she understood. That night, as the wind softened against the eaves, Ewan sat closer than usual. Not touching, but not far. And when the smaller twin stirred in sleep and muttered something, a garbled word that sounded like "Mama," Louisa reached over and laid her hand gently on his back. Ewan watched her fingers as if they were telling him a story, one he didn't dare interrupt. The next morning, she woke to the smell of real bread. Ewan had found yeast in a tin, half spoiled but still breathing. He'd baked it like he'd done it before, kneading the dough with his sleeves rolled high, a smudge of flour on his cheek. The boys clapped when it rose golden in the pan. Louisa laughed, full this time. And Ewan looked at her like he'd never seen light before. Later that afternoon, She swept the porch and found a letter tucked in the cracks wet from snowmelt, ink smudged. It was addressed to Cole Trask. Her heart paused in her chest. Inside was one line. The girl's husband died in '98. If she's with you, she's yours. There was no signature. She stood on the porch until her knuckles turned white around the broom handle. She wasn't a widow. She was property. Again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Spring crept into the valley like a secret. Buds pressed out. Of gray branches, grass pushed through last season's death, and the creek sang again. The world seemed to wake from a long ache. So did Louisa. She moved through the days with a steadier step, her hands no longer shaking when they tied the boys' boots or stirred the fire. The children had begun to speak in soft bursts names for birds, colors of leaves, questions asked only with their eyes. Yuan fixed the porch rail and built a pen for chickens they didn't yet have. Each morning, he walked the ridge line, scanning the horizon as if expecting something or someone. When he returned, he always looked first to the window, checking for her shadow inside. They lived without hurry. The boys helped collect kindling. Louisa learned to mend Yuan's shirts. He taught her how to saddle the mule, and she taught him how to bake cornbread without burning the bottom. There were moments that didn't feel borrowed or quieted by fear. Like when she caught him humming a tune. He swore he didn't. No, or when she touched his wrist by accident and neither pulled away. Still, the letter stayed hidden beneath the floorboard near her cot. The words burned every time she thought of them. She's yours. As if she were a ledger item. As if a womb that failed made her barter for whiskey and flour. One evening, after the boys had drifted off, Yuan found her sitting out back, arms around her knees. The stars had bloomed overhead, the way they did only out in places untouched by townsfolk and their lamps. Was he cruel? He asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Just kept her eyes on the sky, not with fists. Just with what he believed. Yuan sat beside her, knees creaking. He believed I owed him something I couldn't give. And when I didn't, well, his mother said he'd married a hollow cow. That I'd cursed his bloodline. Yuan flinched just barely. I stopped speaking. Seemed easier. They liked me better when I said nothing. You ain't hollow, he said. She looked at him then, and he didn't look away. A breeze moved through the pines. The world didn't change, but something in her chest did. They sat like that until the stars blurred, but the peace frayed the next day when a rider passed slow down the trail. Didn't stop, just looked. A red bandana tied at his throat, long scar down his cheek. Louisa saw him from the window and dropped the kettle. Yuan stepped out, rifle in hand, but the rider was already gone. She didn't say anything. But that night, she tucked the boys in with shaking hands and checked the locks 3 times. Her past hadn't forgotten her. It had just waited for spring. The man came back 3 days later. This time, he wasn't alone. 2 others rode with him, one older, one built like a gatepost. They didn't knock, just dismounted slow and leaned against the hitch rail like they had all the time in the world. Louisa saw them first. She didn't scream, just placed her body between the window and the boys. Yuan stepped out with his rifle. His voice was low even. Don't reckon this is your land? The one with the red bandana smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Ain't looking to settle, just passing through. But we heard tell a lawman used to stay out here. Sheriff Trask, not anymore. The man said. That's so. His eyes moved past Yuan toward the house. Toward her, we're also looking for someone. A woman. Fled from town with a stranger and stole some things that weren't hers. She ain't here, Yuan said. The big one cracked his knuckles. You sure about that? Louisa stepped out then, quiet as snow. Her voice wasn't strong, but it was steady. I didn't steal anything. I was given away. The red bandana turned slow. Well now, there you are. Yuan's hand flexed around the rifle. She's under my roof now. Then maybe we got ourselves a misunderstanding. The older one said, we're just here to bring her back. Her husband's folks sent word. Said she's gone soft in the head. Belongs in care. Louisa stepped closer to Yuan. They're lying. He didn't look at her. Didn't need to. You've got 5 seconds to leave. He said. The red bandana spat. You think we're scared of some washed-up rancher with 2 brats hanging off? Him? I think you ought to count your blessings you're walking today. His voice had changed, not louder, but deeper. Like something long buried was rising. The moment cracked like dry wood. Yuan raised the rifle just as the big man reached for his belt. But Louisa was faster than either. She pulled the axe from the porch rail and threw it with both hands. It didn't hit, but it landed hard enough near the man's boot to freeze him solid. Yuan fired once, a warning shot into the ground between them. The red bandana backed up. Slow. This ain't over. Sure it is, Yuan said. You just don't know it yet. They left without turning their backs. Dust rose behind them like a ghost. That night, no one slept. Louisa sat at the boys' bedside, one hand in each of theirs. Yuan kept the rifle by the door, eyes on the dark. She wanted to thank him, wanted to say something that carried the weight of what had passed. But all she managed was, I won't run again. He looked at her then. Really looked good, he said, and for the first time, he took her hand. It stayed there until morning. They came at dawn. Not like cowards this time, not just 3, but 5 riders, coats open, rifles slung low. The red bandana led them, dust rising behind hooves like smoke before a fire. No warnings now, just the sound of intent. Louisa woke before the knock. Something in the wind or the stillness of the animals outside. She was already dressed when Yuan came to her, rifle in hand, jaw tight. They're back, she nodded. I know. He looked at the boys still asleep, their small chests rising slow. Unknowing, take em through the root cellar. Stay put till I come. No, she said. Not this time. Louisa, I didn't walk through that fire to watch you burn in it alone. He stared at her, eyes wild for a moment, then softened. They didn't kiss. That wasn't their way. But when his forehead touched hers, and he said, all right then, it was louder than any vow. The riders didn't dismount, just circled slow, like wolves finding the weak side of a fence. You got one chance, the red bandana called out. Send her out, and we'll leave the rest be. Louisa stepped into the yard first, shoulders square. You already took everything from me. I've got nothing left to give, that's so. The man sneered. We'll see about that. Yuan stepped beside her. His rifle didn't shake. She's not yours to take. Boy, you don't even know what you're standing in. I know enough. Then from inside the house, a sound neither expected. Papa, a tiny voice. Thin and clear. One of the twins standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. The red bandana blinked. Yours? Yuan looked at the boy. He is now. Something shifted then, not just in the air, but in the men. The red bandana raised his rifle. But Yuan was faster. The shot rang through the morning like a bell. The man fell backward, clutching his shoulder. The others scattered, not cowards. Now, just suddenly reminded of their own lives, Louisa rushed to the boy, pulling him close, covering his ears. The dust settled. The man groaned on the ground, blood soaking the frost. He looked up at Yuan, hate swimming in pain. You think this changes anything? Yuan lowered the rifle. It already has. He didn't shoot again. He just turned away and walked inside, pulling Louisa and the boy with him. Later, she would sew the torn sleeve from the shot. Yuan would lift the other twin into his arms without thinking. And when they sat at the table, all four of them, there was a silence different from the ones before. Not empty. Full. The days that followed passed without noise or strangers. Spring stepped fully into the valley then. Grass thickened, birds returned. The world, it seemed, had made a decision to begin again, and so had they. The wounded man had crawled off or been carried. They didn't know and didn't go looking. No riders came after. No lawmen either. Perhaps because no one had ever expected her to be worth fighting for. Or because some sins, once blood's been drawn, go quiet. Louisa tended to the boys like a mother who'd been practicing in dreams. She learned their rhythms, which one needed a soft song to sleep, which one asked questions in his eyes. She mended their clothes, washed behind their ears, and began teaching them letters on a board by the window. Yuan built a second bed frame, low to the ground, where the twins could sleep side by side without touching the floor. He carved there names into the posts, Owen and Eli. It was the first time they'd had names spoken out loud every day. One morning, Louisa came in from the barn with her apron wet from milk and rain. She paused at the door, watching Yuan sweep the floor as Owen read aloud from a psalter, stammering on the hard words while Eli giggled beside him. She leaned her head against the frame and smiled so soft it barely moved her face that night. After the boys had been tucked in, Yuan sat by the fire and stared at the locket in his hand. "I think I can let go now," he said. She didn't ask what he meant. Just walked to him, sat down slow, and rested her head on his shoulder. He held out the locket. "You want it?" She opened it. Inside, a faded sketch of a woman's face, gentle, strong, forever young. And on the other side, a curl of infant hair, copper as dusk. "She gave me them," he said. "I couldn't see it then. All I saw was what I'd lost." Louisa closed it gently. "We don't owe the dead to stop living." His breath caught. She didn't pull away. "We can remember them by how we carry what they left us. Not just the weight, but the light too." Outside, the stars burned low. The wind carried no voices, only the soft sound of trees brushing against the barn. He reached for her hand and didn't let go. They sat that way until the fire turned to embers. The summer came early that year. By late May, the fields around the house were gold with tall grass and bees. The creek ran clear again, full of trout and memory. And laughter real, free laughter had returned to the porch. Louisa stood in the garden Yuan helped her plant, brushing dirt from her fingers, watching the boys chase each other through rows of early squash. Their shouts echoed off the hills, unafraid. Inside, Yuan was mending a saddle, whistling some hymn neither of them could name. His sleeves were rolled, his face calm. It was the kind of peace she once thought belonged to other people. When the twins ran to her, breathless with sunburned cheeks, she knelt and pulled them close. Eli asked if he could pick the green beans. Owen asked if they could keep the stray cat that kept sleeping in the hayloft. She said yes to both. Later that night, they sat out on the porch, all four of them watching lightning bugs stitch gold into the dusk. The boys dozed in their laps, full from cornbread and stories. Yuan looked over at her and smiled without speaking. She returned it, not because she had to, but because she could. A coyote howled far off, a lonely sound, but not sad. Just part of the land reminding them that wild things still lived, that silence, once cruel, could also mean peace. Yuan placed the locket on the mantel the next morning. Not buried, not forgotten, just resting, and Louisa wrote her name in a book the twins used for letters the first time in years she'd seen it written by her own hand, outside the fence. Still needed mending, the roof still leaked in one corner, and the cow still refused to be milked without complaint. But the house was full not of things, but of meaning, of second chances. Since that morning, the ranch never echoed with silence again. Would you have done the same if it were your daughter? Tell us in the comments what this story meant to you. And if you believe in second chances, subscribe to Silent Ranch.